Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar hosted by the National Association of Secretary of State, or NASS. I'm Kimberly Bassett, the Secretary of State for the District of Columbia, and I'm honored to co-chair the NASS State Records and Archives Committee with my esteemed colleague, New Hampshire Secretary of State, Dave Scanlon. Could you wait for us, Secretary?
Thanks, Secretary Bassett.
I'm happy to moderate today's webinar. We are family, how states support genealogy and research. First, I'd like to thank Ancestry for sponsoring today's webinar. Today, we will hear ideas from Ancestry and 4 states on how to promote and support genealogy research. As you can see, we have a packed agenda, so please either type your questions into the chat during the presentations or hold them until the end of the webinar. Our presenting entities will respond via chat. If there's time, we'll open up the floor for Q&A after all the presenters have concluded. So please keep your microphones muted when you aren't speaking. This webinar is going to be recorded and will be posted on NASS's website. So with that, I'd like to welcome all of you, and I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Jared Aikenhead, Jared Aikenhead, the Senior Manager of Content Acquisition at Ancestry. Thank you, Jared, and thank you for joining us, and we really, really appreciate Ancestry's support.
You're welcome. Thank you, Secretary Bassett, and thank you, the NASS organization, for allowing this opportunity for us to be a part of. This is our world. We live and breathe in terms of genealogy, family history research. So I appreciate that opportunity. If you can go to the next slide. So yes, we can go through this. The title is obviously around public-private partnerships, which is the mechanism by which we gather a lot of content for family history research. And just to start off a little bit with about who we are, some of you may know what we do, but we're a private company established somewhere around 40 years ago, and we've become the global leader in family history with more than 40 billion records of content. We're adding billions of records every year to that number as we continue to grow and work with different organizations. We're over a $1 billion company in revenue. We have over 14,000 employees, 9 global offices around the world, and we have records that represent over 80 countries of origin. So why Ancestry? So one of the main benefits as we work with public institutions like archives, many of you may have worked with Ancestry or be familiar with how we do it. But our offering is in our free digitization and indexing platform, which allows archives to save money and time as they serve up electronic versions of the content that we digitize for them. We also provide free access to those institutions through our Ancestry Institution product, which allows patrons who visit the archives to access all of the records we work with those institutions on. We're continually expanding our technologies, recently with our HWR, or handwriting recognition technology, that we used on the 1950 US Census and also the 1931 Canadian Census. We use a lot of OCR, which is utilized on our mostly on our newspapers.com platform as well. We have a lot of different relationships, partnerships around the globe. In the US, we have a partnership with the National Archives and Records Administration, and we have contractual relationships with more than 40 states, most of those around the archive space as well. And just in terms of our reach and in terms of the records that we're acquiring and how far those records go, you know, the theme for this presentation is around family, and so people have family from all over the world, and we're able to reach out to those people who are searching for records here in the US and other countries as well. And we do that with our searching algorithms. We have over 1 billion searches a month, tens of millions of registered users, and more than 3 million paying subscribers. Part of that global reach, if you want to go to the next slide, includes our ability to share with our partners the usage of those collections. This happens to be from New Hampshire, the Division of Records Management, the archives there, and we present this usage statistics, these graphs, to help identify and facilitate the online reach that their records are having. And I circled an area down below there. I know it's probably pretty small, but we can show the statistics, how these collections are being used from around the world on our platform. And you can see there that there's a daily page view or usage statistic of around 12,000 to 14,000 page views a day from these collections. So it's a really great benefit to see how much those records are being utilized by our subscriber base around the world. In addition to that, there's on the next slide, I'll let you read that for yourself as we continue to partner with different organizations, institutions. I know there's been a lot of news releases around the benefits associated with cost savings and some of the great information that's being disseminated through our platform, where people are finding their relatives, finding those links to their families, and it's through the records that we work with the archives on that's able to be accomplished in this great way. I'm sure many of you have seen some of the TV spots and different TV moments that we call them in our company. We call them aha moments, where people make these discoveries through the records that we partner with archives on. And so there's a couple of little videos that I'm going to end with that kind of show you in real time about some of these aha moments. So hopefully we have the technology that can do this, and I'll leave it to Lindsay to share that with you in the next couple of slides.
Thanks so much. I'm just going to stop and reshare really quickly.
Okay.
And then it's signed by a lot of people. Oh my goodness, look at so many people. Wow.
These are not the kind of people you would expect to see on a typical petition for pardon for
A poor woman.
a poor woman, yeah.
Right.
These are prominent political figures. There's W.P. Hall would, within a couple of years, be elected to the United States Congress and then later become Missouri's governor. Milburn W. Boggs had been governor.
Wow.
And then just one more.
And so I have this for you.
The Amalgamated Journal.
They found this bulletin in which my great-grandfather, P.J. McArdle, he was essentially a union leader, and my great-grandfather wrote this phrase,
May it live long and prosper. Will what? That's insane. 1899.
the fact that 115 years later or something, I would get cast as a character who was known for that very phrase. There was something about it that felt bigger than me. You know, there was something about it that felt kind of cosmic, and it was just such a wonderful connection.
You can see the impact. I think we've all realized that the records that the archives house and how important they are in family history genealogy research, and how they can create links to families and links to the past that bring us all closer together as a family. So with that, I thank you again for your time and the opportunity. If there's any questions, my email's there, and you can maybe share those at the end as well. But thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Mr. Aikenhead. May we live long and prosper. Love it. This is going on really quickly, so let's get to our next person. Next, we have the State of Arizona's Research Library Administrator. Her name is Corey Tuller, who will be telling us a little bit about Arizona's Genealogy Day. Take it away, Corey.
Thank you so much, Secretary Bassett. Hello, everyone, and I very much appreciate the opportunity and the invitation to present today about our event, Arizona Genealogy Day. Arizona Genealogy Day is our annual, virtual, free, day-long event that features speakers on various topics of genealogical interest. It began back in 2021, and we are in the midst of planning our 4th annual event, which will take place on Saturday, February 24th, 2024. I'd also like to take a moment to express gratitude to our Arizona Secretary of State, Adrian Fontes, who is a passionate supporter of genealogy and is always seeking new ways to be involved and lend support to this effort. Next slide, please, Lindsay. So I know time is short, so I'm going to provide a broad strokes overview of the goals, history, logistics, and outcomes of this annual event. A handout will be shared with more in-depth information and links, including a link to an hour-long presentation our planning committee gave to the Arizona Library Association after our 2022 Arizona Genealogy Day event. So if you are interested in creating your own genealogy day in your state and want to learn even more about what we did, I encourage you to watch that video or reach out to me. Next slide, please. I wear a lot of hats in my job, but one of the responsibilities I've had since late 2018, when I was hired as a librarian for the state library, was to strengthen the connection between the state library and the genealogy community in Arizona. As such, that connection with the genealogy community is one of our primary goals of Arizona Genealogy Day. We partner with the Arizona Genealogical Advisory Board, or ASGAB, to host this event. And they are an immense help in making sure that genealogical societies throughout Arizona are aware of and participate in this event. Goal number 2 for us is to highlight local resources. So not only do we want genealogical societies throughout Arizona to attend the event, as well as libraries, archives, museums, and other organizations with genealogical interests, but we also invite them to submit a PowerPoint slide that shares who they are and what type of genealogical resources they offer. We run this slideshow during the breaks between sessions on event day, and we also share it as a PDF post-event. The third goal of the event is to highlight our own resources. In that same PowerPoint slideshow, we include several slides to explain what resources the Arizona State Library has to offer to those interested in genealogy. We point to our website, our social media, our LibGuides, our collections, and more. We also take at least one session of the day's event to have a member of our agency speak on a topic of genealogical interest related to the materials in our collections. The mission of the Arizona State Library Archives and Public Records is summarized in our logo as preserving Arizona, providing access. And this event furthers that goal of providing access by increasing attendees' knowledge of available resources and wherever possible, making recordings of the day's event available. Our final goal is to build a tradition, and we've met that goal as you're going to see in the next section. Next slide, please. As I said, we're in the midst of planning our 4th event. Back in 2021, we didn't know what to expect in terms of attendance or interest, but we knew as soon as the event was over, and actually before it even began, that we had momentum and support from the community, and we knew that we'd be able to see even more success the next year. You can see our flyers here on this slide from past events. And I used a red arrow to point toward the sessions that were given by members of our agency. And I know this is very tiny writing, but there'll be links in the handout where you can see more details. But you can see in 2021, we had a presentation about the Arizona Memory Project and using that for research. That's our digital online collections. In 2022, we had our government document librarians, our state publications, and our federal documents librarian speak about genealogy gems and government documents. And earlier this year in 2023, we had our lead reference archivist and the lead reference, the Arizona collection librarian who does a lot of reference for us, speak about Arizona Genealogy 101 to help orient people to the resources. And as you can see, we've tried to keep our branding consistent. So as the announcements go out, our return attendees can spot us right away. Next slide, please, Lindsay. So there are many factors that lead to a successful event, and I've listed some of them here. And as you've likely found out in your own event planning, many hands make light work, but it is important to have one point person that makes sure everything runs smoothly. We've had 3 to 5 people on the planning committee each year, with 3 of us, myself and 2 ASGAB members, returning each year, so we have some solid institutional event memory. We start planning early and we divide responsibilities for the tasks like marketing, putting together those local resource slides, speaker contracts and registration needs, as well as other things that need to happen. And again, most of the helpful logistics are going to be found in that lengthier recording that is linked in the handout, but I'll share briefly that we host the event on Zoom webinar. We wanted to make sure that we didn't have to closely monitor the audio and video mishaps of attendees that might happen. The attendees, though, are still able to communicate in the chat and use the Q&A feature, which leads to helpful networking in the genealogy community. We also distribute speaker handouts in advance, but also after the fact, along with links to the session recordings that are viewable for 2 weeks post-event or indefinitely, depending on the speaker contract that we negotiated. Next slide, please. Oh, how have we done? Have we met our goals each year? I'm pleased to say that the answer is yes to all 5 of our goals. We've connected with the genealogy community and we've seen an increase in invitations to give presentations to local genealogical societies as well as libraries. We've also successfully highlighted local and our own resources through those downtime PowerPoint slides. And we've stayed aligned to our mission to preserve Arizona and provide access by increasing people's knowledge and access to genealogical content. And we've definitely built a tradition that has put us on the map in Arizona, as you can see, as well as nationally and even internationally. So the map, this is a heat map that I created after our latest event in 2023. And it shows a sample of the attendees from this past year's event. In our post-event survey, we asked people how far they traveled virtually to attend the event so we could gauge our reach. Some people answered their living room couch. That was not the answer we were looking for. We were looking for at least a state. But you can see here that we have a healthy showing in the Southwest, which is to be expected. But we also drew attendees from many parts of the US, as well as from some European countries. So we're very proud to call Arizona Genealogy Day an international event. Next slide, please. Thank you. Here are our registration and attendee numbers. You can see that we saw significant growth from year 1 to year 2 and respectable growth from year 2 to year 3. We anticipate additional growth for our event in February 2024. Zoom webinar does have a cap of 1,000 attendees, so we encourage watch parties at local libraries and societies and organizations, and we're preparing a plan just in case we do need to create a wait list. Next slide, please. Many of the day's attendees decide to stay with us for the entire event. And those who do say that even if a session didn't seem relevant to them on first glance, they did end up learning quite a bit that they could apply to their research. This slide shows the way the numbers have fluctuated throughout the day over the past 3 events. And just as we saw overall numbers increase, our session-specific numbers did as well year over year. with the one exception of session 5 in our 2023 event, which showed just a slight decrease, not significant. But I will note that the first year we had 4 speakers, and then we showed a recording during the lunch hour. But our event was so popular and people wanted even more content that we decided to have 5 speakers and not take a break for lunch, assuming people would step away as needed and bring back food while they watched. Next slide, please. So I hope I've piqued your interest in Arizona Genealogy Day. You are welcome to contact me if you'd like to learn more. I really do enjoy talking about this event as well as planning it. And I also invite you to attend Arizona Genealogy Day 2024 and see for yourself what we do. We're still finalizing a contract, so the registration link isn't live yet. But the link that you see here will also be in the handout, and I can drop it in the chat as well. I'm hoping everything will be in place, ready to accept registrations by the end of November. So you can go on later and reserve your spot, and we'd be happy to have you join us in February. So again, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Corey. That was excellent. I can't wait to possibly join your genealogy day in February. This is great. So now we're going to hear from New Hampshire State Archivist Ashley Miller. And while we're on, I would like to give another shout out to our Secretary of State for New Hampshire. He's on. He's also the co-chair of this amazing committee. So Secretary Scanlon is just did a wave. I also like to thank all of our NASS employees or NASS participants that are on here. I know that I saw Stacy Dodd and I also saw Maria Benson. So thank you guys for being on, as well as my state archivist, Dr. Lopez Matthews. So thank you to those guys. So now let's get started with Ashley Miller and State Registrar Christian Kinnison. The presentation is titled Archives and Vital Records, Genealogical Dream Team. So thank you guys for joining us today. Take it away, Ashley and Christian.
Thank you, Secretary Bassett. We're excited to be here. I'm Ashley, the State Archivist, and
I'm Kristen Keniston, the State Registrar of Vital Records.
Next slide, please, Lindsay.
So we're going to cover a brief history of the Secretary of State and Vital Records. In 1623, the first 2 permanent settlements in New Hampshire were Dover and Portsmouth. Exeter and Hampton followed in 1638. Of the 4 settlements, Hampton was the first to appoint a town clerk on October 31st, 1639. While there were likely other record keepers in the first New Hampshire settlements, William Wakefield became the first to bear the official title of town clerk. Within a few years, the other settlements appointed town clerks as well. The clerks kept records of appointments, deeds, meetings, and the election of officers at town meetings. Eventually, town clerks began recording vital record events for their communities. An act passed in 1692 under King William and Queen Mary required there to be a clerk in every town in the colonies to record marriages, births, and burials. In turn, the town clerk reported vital records on a quarterly basis to the registrar appointed for the province. The position of registrar dates to 1680 and later evolved into what we now know as the Secretary of State. New Hampshire's first constitution was written in 1776 when the Congress of New Hampshire voted in Exeter to establish a civil government. On June 5th, 1781, a constitutional convention was created to begin writing the state's new constitution. After 3 revisions, the Constitution was presented at town meetings in the spring of 1783, where it was ratified and became effective on June 2nd, 1784. Under the new Constitution, the role of the Secretary of State was defined, and one duty was to become the official keeper of the records for the state of New Hampshire. Unfortunately, because of the turmoil surrounding the Revolutionary War period, there are many gaps in vital records in New Hampshire. Vital records were recorded, but they were sparse and inconsistent. In 1858, a law was passed requiring the town and city clerks to not only record vital events, but to also provide copies of vital events to the Secretary of State's office. Part of the legislation required that the Secretary of State would provide registration forms for use by the clerks. This process was slow to take place, and it took further time and legislation in 1891 to solidify the practice. Beginning in the late 1800s and moving into the early 1900s, there was a focus on collecting health statistics with the vital records. Vital records and vital statistics shifted to the Public Health Committee and then later on to the Department of Health and Human Services. New Hampshire vital records remained under the administration of the Department of Health and Human Services until a law passed in 2005 to move vital records back to the Secretary of State. The law was enthusiastically supported by the New Hampshire City and Town Clerks Association. Vital Records does, however, still have a very close partnership with the Department of Health and Human Services. Next slide, please. So these are just early examples of the registration forms that were developed by the Secretary of State for the use of town and city clerks to record and report their vital records. And these forms are dated from about 1868. Next slide, please. So Ashley and I consider ourselves in our roles to be a perfect pairing. Traditionally, the town and city clerks collected and recorded all the vital events that occurred in their community. With advances in technology and modernization, efforts to improve access to vital records commenced, and in 2002, there was a shift from paper records to electronic records. Our current vital records database is known as Nevern Plus. There are no longer paper birth certificates in New Hampshire. Records are entered directly into Nevern Plus by birth registrars at the hospitals. Paper death records are being phased out but are still accepted and entered by New Hampshire licensed funeral directors. Death records can also electronically be certified and pronounced by physicians and APRNs directly into our Nevern Plus database, which are then pushed to funeral directors for completion. Town and city clerks use the system to generate a marriage license and then electronically complete the record by adding the officiant data. Clerks remain the only users, aside from the Department of Vital Records staff, who can issue certified copies and process amendments to records. The Division of Vital Records remains the central repository of all vital record events and statistics in the state. The duty of the state registrar is to ensure all records are being collected, properly recorded, and protected. When records become public, the state registrar releases vital records to the state archivist for further preservation efforts and to make them easily accessible to the public for genealogy research. In New Hampshire, birth records become public after 100 years. Deaths, marriages, and divorce become public after 50 years. The state registrar and state archivist work together for the timely release of the information to the public. Currently, records that are being released still exist in a paper format. The state registrar and state archivist will eventually have to work on developing a plan for the release of records that only exist in electronic format. Next slide.
So this is the New Hampshire State Archives Research Room. We have microfilm readers, books for general New Hampshire history and genealogy research, law and legislative histories, probate indexes, and in wooden cabinets that line the walls, we have vital records. Next slide, please. So how do we work together? The documents begin with Vital Records Division, and once they become public, either after 50 or 100 years, depending on the record type, they're transferred to the Archives Division. This process is actually very simple, as we also share a building. Vital Records is located right next to us, and we share a front lobby. This proximity not only allows us to work more efficiently together, but allows patrons access to a one-stop shop for their genealogy research. In addition to the archive staff, a genealogist from Vital Records also assists in the research room with patrons looking to complete in-depth genealogical research. With current Vital Records available in the research room, we keep separate pull slips for archives and Vital Records requests. Archives maintains these, and they are counted separately for our statistics. Now, we do understand that we're in a unique situation. However, there are some things you can consider for your state. Your relationship with your division of Vital Records. What agency are they in? What is your relationship with that agency? And how are those open vital records accessed in your state? For archivists, do you meet with your head of Vital Records? You could set up regular meetings with them, offer preservation tips, and create shared outreach ideas and practices to help foster that relationship. Next slide, please.
Having vital records under the umbrella of the Secretary of State creates many unique efficiencies that benefit the public. When a vital record is prepared for apostille, our staff can send the document across town on behalf of the customer to complete the process. This is a great benefit to customers who apply for a certified copy through the mail. Town and city clerks wear many hats in their daily duties and have to collaborate with multiple state agencies. They already work closely with the Secretary of State's office and archives. Having vital records as part of that team is a big benefit for them and their constituents because they have one less agency they have to contact. Another great benefit to being part of the Secretary of State is that we have direct communication with the Elections Division. Our software platforms communicate, and voters who are deceased are automatically flagged for review to be removed from the voter checklist. This not only helps with fraud prevention, but it also keeps our voter checklists accurate and current. Being part of a smaller, unbiased department allows us to have our own resources, such as IT, without sharing them with other members of a larger department, and we are not as likely to be affected by budget cuts. And as Ashley just explained, the co-location of vital records and state archives allows for shared space for genealogical research. Both departments are responsible for the protection, preservation, and maintaining access of the state's important records. We are sister departments, and having us together just makes sense.
Next slide, please. So our other partnerships, we have both partnered with Ancestry and Family Search representatives who have come to the building to digitize our collections. We've had probate, military, pension, census, naturalization, deeds, and vital records digitized, just to name a few. Ancestry provides partner institutions, as previously stated, with an institutional membership and allows unrestricted access to the provided digitized materials after 3 years, and they also index the data for you. We're currently working with Ancestry to compile a list of new materials to digitize in the upcoming year, both for vital records and archives. Next slide, please. So our outreach efforts. Outreach is one of the core functions of archives. People have to know about your collections, your services, and what you have to offer to be able to use them, and more importantly, advocate for them. I write monthly articles for the Concord Monitor, our capital city newspaper, each month focusing on a different collection from the archives. I then turn these monthly articles into monthly video series with the help of our local community television station. They also helped me create a virtual tour of the archives for American Archives Month. I submit to our communications director weekly Throwback Thursday posts from the archives for the Secretary of State social media channels. And instead of a poster, which is traditional to create for American Archives Month, I created a bookmark using a quote that is painted in our research room and tips for preserving your family history. We also, on occasion, loan out materials to local institutions for exhibition. Next slide, please. Kristen and I have been with the state for less than a year, and we're both still pretty new in our positions, but we have plenty of ideas for the future. We're planning for genealogy workshops and local history lectures. We'll be hosting scanning and digitization days for members of the public who want to share their family history without giving up their physical collections. We'll be getting interactive touchscreen exhibits for our front lobby, which serves both vital records and archives patrons so they can connect with our collections. Finally, we're in the process of launching our new archival software, which will have a public-facing catalog that will go live in the spring. So be on the lookout for all of our upcoming changes. Next slide, please. Finally, here's our contact information. Thank you all so much for listening.
Thank you, Team New Hampshire. That was excellent, excellent. I love that you used that your agencies are a sisterhood. I love that. We can learn so much from your partnership, and thank you so much. A lot of us know the relationships between the archives and vital statistics, and you all have set an amazing example. So thank you. You're winning, Secretary. Now we're going to hear from Vermont, our state archivist and chief records officer, and my friend Tanya Marshall, with Marisa Dorbrick, archivist. And Vermont's presentation is Small State, Strong Connections, Big Impact. So please take it away, Vermont.
Well, thank you, Secretary Bassett, and thank you, Secretary Scanlon, and I'm representing the Vermont team. I know we're getting a little out of order, so I wanted to see if Lindsay
So that's my fault.
That's okay. I'm happy to wait. It's whatever works best for everyone here. I am here with Marisa Dobrick and also the rest of the team Vermont. I believe that our Secretary of State, Sarah Copeland-Hanses, is on, and also our Deputy Secretary of State, Lauren Hibbert. So shout out to them. We're here to talk about small states, strong connections, and big impact. Next slide, please. So as we already talked about, genealogy and family history is connecting people and relationships, and that's really the core of archives in general and records management, and also helping people identify and learning about ancestors. Vermont's a very small state, very small population. Obviously, people don't just come and stay here. And so recognizing that family history research and genealogical research doesn't have any boundaries when it comes to geography. So we've really leveraged those strong connections to make those big impacts for individuals who do have ancestors, or they're here or are here now and doing their own research and maybe don't have necessarily a Vermont connection. And so we're very much focused on partnerships and outreach initiatives. We're also a very small team, which is not uncommon for state archives and records groups for that, but looking for the ability to try to get more access, more availability of records electronically, reduce our staff time as well. Next slide, please. So some of this is a little bit of a repeat from Jared's, but it's been more than 15 years since we partnered with Ancestry. We may be one of the first agreements or contracts to do that. I don't know. But what we decided underneath that, the Secretary of State's office used to be the registrar of vital events, and that stopped in 1980. And then we created the Vermont State Archives and Records Administration in 2008 and got back the responsibility of issuing the certified and informational copies on behalf of the Department of Health. That came underneath an agreement with Ancestry, which was very, very helpful for us. At that point, you know, we're an open vital record state, so there's no restrictions on access. And the ability to work with Ancestry has not only made those records available to individuals, but it's really decreased the amount of time that our staff does to provide informational copies. And so that dashboard, we've just been able to see the increase year after year of vital records, as well as some other records available through Ancestry. In this case, we have a state page as well, which has been wonderful. Individuals can sign into our state portal, and if they're Vermont residents, they'll be passed right through to the records that are digitized underneath our umbrella agreement. And in addition, there's free access to the Ancestry Institution, which is what Jared and others have mentioned. It's been an incredible partnership. So I know Ancestry is a partner and sponsor for this, but it's been a wonderful partnership with us, and we enjoy working with the Ancestry team. Next slide. Newspapers.com, which is part of Ancestry, most secretaries of state, and definitely it's true for Vermont, established newspapers of record. And underneath Vermont state law, those newspapers were required to be preserved by the Vermont State Library. In 2017, they transferred their entire collection of microfilm. They had been microfilming them due to that preservation, and we worked a collaboration through newspapers.com to have them digitized. And that is no cost to the state. Again, that state page, individuals are able to go through the state portal, log into their myvermont.gov account, and be passed through to do research online. We've also opened up that agreement to other newspaper providers that maybe weren't part of the newspapers of record that were preserved by the Vermont State Library to use our agreement. They essentially transfer their records into the state archives to do that. This is our largest site. It has been phenomenal. So I really am impressed by the work that and the collaboration that we've had with newspapers. We use it as a staff all the time. Obviously, individuals doing genealogical research use it a lot, family history. We use it for legal research when we're doing past legislation. It has been phenomenal for that access. So newspapers.com, and if you're a Secretary of State with the newspapers of record, there's probably is a preservation function underneath the government documents law in your state, and this is a great opportunity to make those records available. Next slide, please. And as mentioned, Family Search is another partner. So these are online content providers for us. In this case, Family Search had been out into different Vermont towns, county offices, courthouses, doing a lot of, in the past, microfilming, and now doing digital work. We have a partnership and agreement with them. Same process. There's no digitalizations at no cost to us. In this case, the access is free to any records through family searches, not just Vermont content. Individuals can get a free user account. And then working collaboratively between Family Search and Ancestry, we've allowed for, if it's been digitized by one, it's available through the other. So we have both sites. So if someone is just a Family Search user, they're going to have some access maybe to some content that Ancestry has digitized, and on the flip, if there's been something that Family Search has worked for us, then they'll be available through Ancestry. And we have probate records, for example, through Ancestry through that reciprocal process. So our online content providers have been huge partners. It's made a lot of work easier. And our constituents have been very thankful for that. And now I'm going to pass it to Marisa Dobrik to talk about our outreach efforts.
Thank you, Tanya. So as a reference archivist, I have more of like getting my hands dirty and working with our researchers on the topics that they're working on. So one of the exciting things we do is just when it comes to archival research, we meet and connect with people. So trying to highlight to people beyond what they can get on Ancestry and newspapers.com and connecting them things with court cases, town records, municipal reports, and all the things you can find in them. I feel like I evangelize for the reference room and doing research sometimes because you can find places unexpectedly your family story. So human service registers and state publications, but all sorts of other pieces when you're doing this kind of talk. One of the biggest things truly is connection. So not just the archival research, but in a small state, it is a long state with a mountain in the middle. So we like to meet people as well. Can you, next slide, please? So we have a lot of opportunity to be flexible, to host tours and exhibits for what matters to a person. So a genealogy group can reach out to us and say that they're doing a look at a crime, an historic crime, or the problems that faced their ancestors. And we can create a pop-up exhibit that's tailored to the audience. And this has been very helpful, and it can be really fun too. So if somebody like this genealogy group that you can see in the picture had come in, we gave them a tour of the vaults, let them see behind the scenes, show them the state constitution and the George Washington letter. But then also it's fun because these are folks who can then be excited about the records they're seeing. And because of having Ancestry and Family Search and newspapers.com, we have more time to spend for these sort of specialized tours and exhibits. Next slide. And another really fun, I love doing outreach and meeting our constituents right where they are. And that's one of the things that I just finished doing. You can see we do regional conferences and present sessions. So I've recently been one of the ones to be lucky enough to provide this information. Several of our staff have been going around doing workshops and other kinds of regional opportunities. Presenting on a variety of topics, and then also because it's a small state and we're close, there's always an opportunity to, oh, I know that secretary and I think she might, I saw her last week, I'll let her know how things have been going. We have a close-knit state, and so just contributing an article to a genealogy is the next step. I'll be doing an article for our local genealogy journal, and also a lot of people have ancestors that passed through Vermont. So connecting with the folks right where they are is really a rewarding chance. And it's one-on-one connections that build into larger ones. Next slide, please. And I think one of the things we have really grown, I mean, you might be aware that Vermont had some pretty devastating floods in July. And what we've really tried to do here, and I love this, is meet people where they are. So not only genealogists doing genealogy, but also they want help saving their own family histories. And that's really important. And we've got more time now to be able to meet people, to do educational hands-on things. So the Save Your Family Treasures workshop was very well received. Also, the home movie day was fun and overview. We do that every couple of years. So these kinds of opportunities to help people preserve their own family history has really, as we call our presentation, it's a big impact and it's very meaningful, especially to people who thought that their records were completely lost and found out that they could preserve them. It really touches people in ways that we don't always know until we hear the stories later. Next slide. And so I just wanted to thank everyone for listening to our part of this and this opportunity. We really do believe that strong connections and big impacts, and that's with many other states that had people pass through Vermont. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marissa and Tanya. And I would like to recognize the Secretary of Vermont. Is she still on?
Thank you, Kimberly.
Good to see you. Good to see you. That's amazing. I love all of it. The pop-up exhibits, the Save Your Family Treasures Day, your relationship with Ancestry. I didn't know that there was newspaper.org and the other things that you mentioned. So thank you so much for giving us the background on that. And guys, it's my fault. I skipped the great state of New Jersey. So our next presenter is Ronnie Calder, and Ronnie is the supervising archivist with the New Jersey State Archives. And Ronnie will cover indexing and digitizing New Jersey's earliest land and text records. So the floor is yours, Ronnie.
Thank you, Secretary Bassett. And no worries, it's all good. Hi, everyone. I'm Ronnie Calder. I'm the supervising archivist at the New Jersey State Archives. Joe Klett was supposed to present today, but unfortunately had a family emergency. So you're stuck with me. Thank you for inviting us. I'm going to give you an overview of two major projects underway at the New Jersey State Archives that directly benefit genealogical research. I apologize in advance for speeding through some of the slides since the presentation is going to be recorded and made available beyond today. Joe thought that it would be helpful to include detail in the slides in case other states found these projects useful. Next slide, please. The first project is the Early Land Records Project, which we started in 2016. Before providing some illustrations, I wanted to summarize the context and the need for this major endeavor. Here is a brief history of the land rights in New Jersey. We were founded in 1664 as a British colony. Land rights and governance rights were initially vested in two proprietors, John Lord Berkeley and Sir George Carteret, whose successors then divided the province into two colonies, East Jersey and West Jersey. While the proprietors surrendered their governing rights to the Crown in 1702, they retained their land rights. So now there were land transactions being recorded by three different parties: East Jersey proprietors, West Jersey proprietors, and the provincial secretary, which later would be the Secretary of State. It was not until 1998 that the East Jersey proprietors dissolved and their rights and records were acquired by the state of New Jersey. And then in 2005, the West Jersey proprietors deposited their records at the State Archives. So there, for about 18 years ago, we found ourselves with many boxes of land records going back to the late 1600s that had never been fully indexed or accessible to the public. Next slide. Some of this history plays out in the documents. This is the March 1664 transaction between King Charles II and his younger brother, James, Duke of York, in which the king bestowed upon the Duke a patent allowing him to take over the area known as New Netherland. Next slide. Then in June of 1664, Duke of York gave the land between the Hudson and Delaware rivers to Berkeley and Carteret. We consider the document that's shown in the next slide to be New Jersey's birth certificate. You can go to the next slide. This actually is considered New Jersey's, the first time New Jersey is referred to as New Jersey. It was named in honor of the Isle of Jersey, where Sir George Carteret was from. Next slide. This is a map of New Jersey in the proprietary period. There were a couple of attempts to separate it into West and East Jersey. The line that's highlighted right now was the first line, and click next. Then this was what actually ended up happening. So you can see there was an area between that straight diagonal line and the straight and then wavy line where people were part of West Jersey and then they became part of East Jersey. And you can imagine that probably caused a lot of headaches. Click again. And both East Jersey and West Jersey had their own capitals. So there was Perth Amboy for East Jersey and Burlington for West Jersey. Next slide. Just briefly, these are some press. This is some press coverage that we had when we acquired the East Jersey records. Next slide. And then some photos of the move when the deposit of the West Jersey records happened in 2005. Next slide. And also some press coverage of that. Next slide. So by 2005, we found ourselves in a very unusual position of literally unpacking boxes of records going back to the 1600s from 3 different records creators. Records, of course, that were highly valuable for genealogical research. As you can see, there were over 76,000 total documents. Next slide. And then the early land records project was conceived. We had already started building a database to index some of the Secretary of State land records that we had. The title search sector land surveyors had expressed interest in helping to get the records of the proprietors indexed as well. And then the Genealogical Society of New Jersey asked if we would like to partner in a federal grant for a genealogical project. So we put this together as a single concept. The Genealogical Society would be our fiscal agent and grant applicant, and the title search folks would help fundraise. The state archives would oversee the work and own the resulting data. Next slide. The basic goal was to index all known pre-1785 New Jersey land records and to digitize at least 15,000 of them initially. We also anticipated the need for conservation funding for some selected items. Next slide. In total, we fundraised about $350,000 for the project between federal and in-state grant makers, land title and land surveyor sectors, and private donations. Next slide. The Genealogical Society developed a website to promote the project and recognize the funders. Next slide. And then the State Archives built the database, which now indexes over 80,000 documents with over 400,000 name entries, which has been a great genealogical benefit for our researchers. Next slide. This is a shot of one of our part-timers processing the collection. On the left, you'll see how they came into us. And then obviously the bigger picture is what we're processing them into. Next slide. And then this is one of our contractors extracting data from the original manuscripts and entry into an Access database. Next slide. The next couple slides are going to show some images from the different surveys and land records. You can see they're actually really nicely done. Next slide. We also had some unexpected finds. This is a 1677 deed bearing the original marks and seals of indigenous peoples tribe leaders who transacted with the early Quaker settlers in southern New Jersey. This eventually became present-day Gloucester County. Next slide. The survey on the left from 1799 shows a family burial ground in addition to the house and the outbuildings. The image on the right labels a small river as, quote, the branch the girl was drowned in, end quote. Next slide. And this is what the results from the database search will look like. This is a search that Joe did for Richard Beadle. In the first record, you can see it has an option to view the PDF. That means the record has been scanned. The other 2 records which have not been scanned yet, you'll see a select option, which will allow you to select the document, add it to your shopping cart, and then place an order with us. We'll then send you a digital image through your email. Next slide. This is the PDF. When you click on that PDF link, this is the PDF that you'll see online. Next slide. This database search here shows how we qualify the data with ethnicity and gender designations. Joe did a search for African Americans in Monmouth County. You'll see for the second record in here, the column on the far right, it shows a link to the Monmouth County Clerk's Office. While we have microfilm of the records available for in-person research at the State Archives, we don't sell copies of this type of records since the originals are held by the county clerk. So we link the database users to the county website from our index entry. Next slide. This is an example of a conserved document from the collection from 1682. Next slide. And then this is the 1677 deed that I mentioned earlier. We also had that conserved. Next slide. The next project I want to touch upon is the tax rateable project. We plan on, or we are actually indexing and digitizing nearly 2,000 New Jersey tax lists dating from the 1770s to the 1820s. These records are invaluable for genealogical research for several reasons. They can serve as a substitute for the lost New Jersey federal census schedules from 1790 to 1820, which were destroyed by a fire. They list not only property owners, but also lessees and householders, as well as single men. And they also document free Black residents and unmarried and widowed women. Next slide. The concept for the project is pretty simple. We scan the books, fully index them, and link the images to an online database. We started the scanning work prior to COVID, but then during the work from home period, during the pandemic, we made the indexing component a major project that could be done remotely. Next slide. As of this month, we have scanned 1,633 of the tax books, which all have multiple pages, and 689 of them have been fully indexed. This amounts to over 270,000 name entries to date. Next slide. This is our lone staff member who scans the tax ratables. So she has scanned all 1,633, and she has about a little over 200 left to go. Next slide. This is an image of the actual tax list. We've kind of cropped it together. This is from Piles Grove Township in Salem County from 1798. This was used in an article that Joe wrote about the widow Abigail Weaver, who is listed as the property owner. It was part of the proof that Abigail had not died in 1785, as she's listed here in 1798. Some researchers had previously thought that she had passed away in 1785. Next slide. And finally, this is a tax list from Upper Freehold Township in Monmouth County from 1779. It is one of many examples showing free Black residents. In this case, you can see Caesar is listed. He is taxed as a householder with livestock. Because of the New Jersey tax laws during the 1779 and 1783 period, these lists are considered by Revolutionary War lineage societies like the Daughters of the American Revolution and Sons of American Revolution as establishing contributions to the cause of the revolution. Thus, if any descendants of Caesar, if Caesar's descendants apply for membership, they could do so based on this document. So thank you so much for allowing me to present and highlight these two projects.
Woo! Thank you, Ronnie.
Sorry.
That was amazing. I can't believe how much work you all have done since 2005 and all the things that you have discovered. It's so interesting. And tax lists, I'm not even going to go into that. That is pretty amazing. So thank you so much. Again, I want to thank everyone. I know Lindsay is going to take it away. Thank you again, Secretary of State Scanlon, and everyone who's joined us. This was awesome. It was a powerful 2 hours. Also, again, thank Ancestry so much for sponsoring this for us. Thank you, Jared, and I'll let Lindsay take it over. Have a great weekend.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Secretary Bassett, for moderating, and Secretary Bassett and Secretary Scanlon for supporting this, Ancestry for the sponsorship, and all of the presenters. NASS it's most valuable when we share these great ideas across the states. So we had a packed agenda. We wanted to fit in as much information as possible, and thank you to the presenters for covering so much so quickly. So we won't go open for Q&A since we're right at the end, but I did drop my email address in the chat. If you missed catching any of these folks' contact information and you'd like to reach out and learn more, please do not hesitate to reach out to me at NASS, Lindsay Forson. My email address is in the chat. And you know, we will get this recording posted to the website very soon and share that out to everyone. So thank you again to all of you, and we'll see you again soon at the NASS Winter Conference.
All right. Thanks, everybody.